Right, in this video I'm going to be going over how I made this quick little planet scene in space. So here I started with the stars, just some basic fractal noise with high contrast and low brightness to create those little specks in space. I made it a 3D layer and I pushed it far back into Z-space. This is a common technique for making stars. And here I start making the planet, so I made it a pre-comp with a that was larger than the 1080p comp that I was in. I started with some fractal noise, messing around with the noise settings. When you're doing something like this, you want to make sure it doesn't look like just a default plug-in or anything that you've made with the noise. You want to add some randomness. So I have two layers of fractal noise here with a one that's just a random shape there in the foreground, and then the background layer with the more stringy noise is back there as well. Here I'm bringing in some textures that I will use to add an additional layer of just some other detail to add to the planet surface, the planet map here. I'm messing around with the blend modes just to find something that I like. A lot of this is just messing around with settings and things until you get something that you want to use. Here I'm messing with the color to give it the kind of color I want. I wasn't set on any one particular look, so I was just messing around to get something that I wanted, and I settled on this bluish, greenish, purplish kind of cast. Here I'm adding polar coordinates, and then well, you can't actually mask it off, so you have to use a linear wipe unless you pre-comp it. Using a linear wipe with the polar coordinates to make sure that the top and bottom of the map will be tileable on a sphere, so that the texture repeats and there's not a harsh line there. So you can see I'm seeing that the polar coordinates is working. So here I'm setting up the map so that it will be tileable horizontally. So I set it up to be tileable vertically at the top and bottom, but horizontally I set it to offset so that the left and right sides were exactly in the middle, and then I masked off the adjustment layer that had the offset in the middle so that the left and right sides would be repeatable there. In the background, I'm setting up the stars, getting my 3D space set, and here I'm setting up the lighting. These are all 3D layers, and the planet layers are not exactly 3D because it's the CC sphere effect in After Effects, so I have to set it to auto orient. Here I'm setting up the sun. It's a few different layers of fractal noise set to different scales and different levels of contrast and brightness in order to create a sense of depth. This isn't an entirely realistic comp. This is just a little space scene. It's not meant to be photorealistic necessarily. So I'm creating the sun with those layers of fractal noise. I'm not bothering with creating a repeatable or tileable map for the surface because I'm not going to be very close to the sun in this shot. But that is something you can do with the same technique I used for the planet. These are all techniques I've learned from different sources, common techniques for making planets and suns and things like that. There's no real innovation here on my part. This is just a combination of different things that you learn over the years to make a space scene. So here for the sun, I'm setting it up so that it will have a sort of inner glow, basically. So with the CC sphere, I manipulate the lighting, set it to be behind the sphere, and then increase the specular and the roughness and things like that, so it creates this kind of halo effect around in the interior. Then you set it to screen on top of your original, blur it out a little bit, mess around with the brightness and all that to get the kind of effect that you want. Here I'm just duplicating the sphere again, and it's set to fill, so it doesn't have all the fractal layers. It just has a solid color on the sphere, but it's in the same position because I duplicated the original layer. And so I'm just having different colors there and different brightness and adding glow to it to get a very bright kind of sun. So I have a couple layers of glow and a color adjustment on the original layer with the texture on it, and then I have several different layers of the sun with just a solid color fill on there for additional glow. Here I'm setting up the camera move. It's just a simple move, and I'm readjusting the lighting to match where the sun actually is. You want to make sure that if you're doing a space scene, the lighting matches. You want to make sure that the scene makes sense. Here I'm duplicating the planet layer to add like layers of atmosphere. So again, I've added a solid fill. I've added a solid fill instead of the planet texture there, but I've just duplicated the same layer so it's in the same position as the original planet. And I'm messing with the light height and the brightness and the specular while keeping the position of the light the same, so that I can create this atmospheric effect. So I have a wider color to represent the atmosphere, and then a tighter one to sort of be around the very edge of where the atmosphere should be, so it's kind of bright along that line there. And here I'm duplicating again and adding more color and glow in the background just by blurring out another copy of the planet layer with a solid fill on it instead of the texture. And here I'm messing around with a radial blur to add a subtle kind of glow behind it. I'll lower the brightness and mess around with the brightness on the sphere effect. This is how I tend to do planets. I like to add multiple kinds of layers of the CC sphere effect, and instead of using the planet's texture, I like to just duplicate it so it's in the same position, but have instead of the textures, just have a fill on there so I can mess around with atmosphere and get, because if it's just the planet texture, it doesn't look quite right. So you have to add different layers of glow and all this. And I'm doing the same thing with the sun here. I've come back to that and messing around with the glow and the blur on some of those elements to try to get it to look better, in my eyes at least. Who knows? Here I'm bringing this actual texture here to create a small moon around the planet. So I've put it in a pre-comp. I'm going to adjust the color a little bit, add some contrast with curves. Bring in another texture, set it to soft light there. And here I'm going to do the same mapping technique. So I put that in a pre-comp, do the optics polar coordinates rather. And again, I try to do the mask, but then I remember that you would have to pre-comp it again in order to put a mask on polar coordinates. So I have to do linear wipe to add the feathering and cut it off there at the top and bottom, and then offset for the horizontal mapping so that it is repeatable or tileable. So I've put CC Sphere on this map, and I'm going to set the lighting to be at the same angle as the planet. And I'm sort of positioning it in Z space and also just X and Y to try to figure out where I want it to be for the comp. I'm adjusting the lighting and all this. Here I've duplicated it and I've rotated the light around on the second copy, or the copy, to add some lighting that's being cast from the planet below, because it's kind of bright, and I suppose in this imaginary world there would be that light cast on the moon if it were so close. Here I'm messing around with the glow, the inner glow on the sun there, try to refine the light. So, I got all my elements in place here, and the key to a lot of this, uh, creating a composition is just tweaking brightness and contrast and scale and levels of glow and the lighting and all the color. You just want to tweak all these little things, and it's easy to get the big elements in there, but it's a lot harder to kind of tweak things to get something that looks good. And here I'm adding a little color grade to see where I want the shot to end up. And I'm adding a glow here to increase the illumination of the sun there. So it kind of glows around the side of the planet when the camera goes by. Again, I'm not necessarily creating something to look entirely realistic necessarily, just something that looks interesting. Has some cool colors and, that kind of thing. I've got a little bit of rotation on the planet, but it's not perfectly right to the way the camera is moving. And I didn't adjust that in this video, but before the final comp is done, I might do that. Right now, it's just got a Y rotation on it. So there I added, a standard sort of lens flare kind of effect, anamorphic lens, kind of very fake looking lens flare. It's just a horizontal glow that's set to be a blue color, and then the glow radius is set to be as high as possible in the horizontal direction only. So here I'm messing around with the elements again, tweaking them to kind of get them how I like. I added a widescreen letterbox in there because I made the comp in 1080p, but I wanted to make it a little bit wider. Here I'm just trying to test out the camera motion, see if it's a little too quick or, anything like that. See how the elements interact with the lighting and everything, the glow. Again, in this video I didn't adjust it, but I might go back and, before the final video, adjust the actual speed of the camera, because it might be a little too quick. Here I'm adding a little blur to the moon, just to make it not so perfect. You don't want everything to be perfect and sharp. You want to have some things be blurred. It's because in real life things aren't all sharp. You have things that are not as clear. Here I'm pre-comping everything to add a little bit of chromatic aberration. This is an interesting technique where you duplicate the layer 3 times, set them all to add, and then you use the individual channels levels effect. Set one for the red channel, the green channel, and the blue channel, and then you can offset those in space, X and Y, or using the scale to get a simulated chromatic aberration effect, which is a lens effect that happens in real cameras, where the colors near the outer edges are distorted. Here I'm adjusting the color grade again. And so with that chromatic aberration, I set the green channel to be slightly larger in the scale, like 100.2% or so that it will add that kind of fake chromatic aberration. And I also offset the red channel to the right, I think, in X by 1 pixel. Here I'm adding some grain, just in the channel levels and such to get what I want. And that's about it. So thanks for watching this video, and that's how I created that little space scene there.